Swing, swing, squish, squish. Fast. Apparently not fast. Wrong, wrong. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the Can-Am clutches, most particularly the stock and CVTech, and why I think there's a lot of misinformation floating around the web about this clutch. So this is not a video bashing the CVTech or the STM or the QSC. It's more or less that people need to realize that this clutch is a good clutch, and that there's just not a lot of good people tuning these clutches, or they're tuning them incorrectly. Even with the CVTech, this was supposedly set up, and I never believed it from the start, from when I got it, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. So first off, with the stock clutch, what I want to point out to you people, that everyone says that this is a unlocked clutch, meaning that this movable sheath is not connected to the fixed side in any way. So that means this will spin independently, unlocked. My only question for all you guys who say this is an unlocked clutch is, how do you tighten it? If this is a floating clutch, this would not tighten up. It needs something to push on to tighten, and it's got to be fixed. If this was floating, you would never be able to tighten this. Second is, if there's a floating clutch, you see there's a taper inside the spider right there, and there's a taper inside the fixed side of the shaft. If this was floating, say you were able to tighten it, you're telling me this spinning on it, that would just wear out the clutch. It would wear it out so fast. So this is why I say it's not a unlocked clutch. Not for those two reasons, but the third reason, this taper that I pointed out on these clutches, these pretty much force themselves in. It's the same concept of the taper on the back side of the fixed sheath. Is when you tighten it down, is it kind of presses in there and makes a tapered tight fit. Same thing goes here. You put this all together, you tighten it down, this will squeeze into that just a little bit, and that will make this fixed to this side of the clutch. So it is in fact a locked clutch. The Skidoo TRAs on the 800 E-Tech, I know for sure the 2014s, so around the 2014 era, they were kind of the same way. You took off the outer half of the clutch, and it was a tapered fit onto the shaft. And guess what? That is not an unlocked clutch. Just like how this is not an unlocked clutch. So it's not that it's a bad clutch, it's just a missed, or a badly tuned clutch. Or other people tune them badly. Because you also got to think is that this clutch was originally designed to turn 25-inch tires, or 26-inch tires, or 30s, or whatever, and then you go put on 30-inch tires, 33-inch tires, tires that weigh way heavier than stock. And a lot of people say that height and the weight doesn't matter, and that's bullshit. I had ITP XTRs 26 inches on my XXC 1000R, and I went down to 25 CSTs, which was 50 pounds lighter with all the weight saved on all the tires. And I lost top speed, I lost bottom end. The only thing I gained was backshift. It backshifted way better with the lighter tires. So the height and weight does matter. Probably more or less the lug, the load that it would put on the secondary. But that's something for another video. But the height and the weight, your lug height, does matter. It matters on your suspension, and it matters in your clutch. Even if you're sticking with the stock tire size, but going to a way heavier tire, say you're going from the ITP hole shots to some Sedona Ripsaws, there's a huge weight difference there. So that always got to be taken into account. And a lot of times it's just little tweaks that make it perform better. So that's my gripe with this clutch, and why I think these clutches get tuned wrong is I think a lot of people put a very high stall on this clutch, meaning that this clutch sits at its fixed position, or not its fixed, but its resting position, and when it hits, say, 2200 RPMs, it engages and touches the belt, or starts grabbing the belt. It doesn't spin the belt, it just boop, touches it. That's engagement. More engagement is not necessarily better. Probably when you're running super tall tires, when you're doing drag racing applications, fucking fly, get out of here. A higher stall will probably benefit you. Like me and a lot of others, we do a lot of aggressive trail riding. We don't like that abrupt engagement higher up in the RPM band. It's not fun. And I think that's why these things get mistuned. Also why they get mistuned, you can't really see, but these weights, I've looked and I've looked and I've looked and I've looked, there's not, in my opinion, there's not a good adjustable weight in here for these clutches. The only clutch kit I would consider running was the Dynojet one, and that was only because I can get 6 weights that were adjustable, and that were adjustable with magnets. My gripe with that clutch, though, is that you only could add the weight to the tip. Like the Can-Am clutch, yes, most of your weight's at the tip, but to fine tune it, you may want to bring it in more, make it rev a little faster, maybe lose a little peak RPM. That's where it would be nice to have like a set screw style down the middle on these clutches. Also too, there is not a lot of ramp choices out there, meaning the curve, this curve here, there's not a lot of different ramps out there. From what I've read is that the Renegade ramps shift harder and pull better than the Outlander ones. So you got 2 options. It's not looking very good. So especially if you're going from a Renegade and you go to like an EPI where it's 0 adjustability, they use the Outlander profile, yeah, it probably does feel more sluggish than your stock setup or the aftermarket setup. So that makes a difference. And when I was looking around for clutching, I debated about welding weight on the back side of these, maybe grinding down the ramp some to get it shifting where I wanted. And you guys be like, oh no, don't weld on it, you'd wreck it. Well, you can go watch Dynaport's video on clutching. He welded onto it. I built a clutch kit for a snowmobile, and I welded on the pin weight inside the clutch, and guess what? That sled fucking hauled. So, now going to the CV Tech, I think the lot of reason why people go to the CV Tech is one, cost. This is actually a very cost-effective option for a clutch, especially if, say, you're adding performance and your stock clutches worn out. I needed rollers, pins, and buttons in this clutch. And then I needed to clutch it after tuning, putting a slip-on on my four-wheeler and tuning it. So I would have been, about $500 into this clutch, and this clutch was $680 out the door. Granted, it was $680, not tuned correctly. So, onto the CV Tech now. Big benefit with the CV Tech, and I think why people have performance gains out of the CV Tech, is the CV Tech, from what I've read, I haven't weighed it, and you can tell there's an easy weight difference between these two. This is 2 to 2.5 pounds lighter than a stock clutch. Now that's way less weight on the clutch side, so it spools up way faster, and you can feel it in the thumb of the throttle. Is that the CV Tech being lighter spools up way faster, and that is a performance benefit over the stock clutch. Now my gripe with the CV Tech has nothing to do with being lighter or how it shifts, but the lack of tuning available is that you got your governor cup and you got your sliders with some weights in it, right? You don't have any differences in ramp profile. And unlike the stock clutch with these flyweights, is I could probably grind these at home or at my work. These, I cannot. I have to send it down, so I'm kind of stuck with that profile unless I want to spend money on it. Another benefit of the CVTech, way less moving parts. Like this, you got your sliders, you got a fixed side, 2 bushings, you got your weights in there, you got your little, I guess more sliders, look for your little, the guides for the governor cup, and you got the governor cup, spring. And that's all on the movable side. Where on the movable side of the Can-Am clutch is you got pins, weights, 1 bushing, rollers, pucks, washers between the rollers and the spider. Then you got the spider itself, and then you got the spring. So you're looking at probably 20 more parts just in the stock clutch over the CVTech one. So that is a benefit. Another benefit is that these sliders are pretty cheap. I think I seen them at like $100 to get them replaced. Where replacing the rollers and the pins and this is going to cost me like $100. And these factory rollers lasted me about 1,000 miles. I'm on my 2nd set now, and there are flat spots in them again. So, only bent downfall with the CVTech, if you don't have a dealer near CVTech dealer near you, I have to order all my stuff. That's very inconvenient. I can go to any Can-Am dealer and have a good chance that they have those parts for me. And guess what? They drop right in. So, on to the CVTech. My gripe with these tuned CVTech clutches is all the documentation I see out there is mostly CVTech sending out pre-calibrated clutches. Even when I ordered this from 3P Off-Roading and Clutching, that this was sent out being pre-calibrated. Okay, that's just the primary. And what I've seen online and from a lot of vendors is that the CVTechs are being sent out with stiffer secondary springs. Doesn't matter if it's red, white, silver, those are the most common ones I've seen. So what this clutch is now different is the CV as the secondary now has a stiffer spring in it. Now that stiffer spring equals resistance. Stiff equals resistance, resistance equals RPM. So all these guys that put this clutch on say it's worse than stock. They pin it, hits the rev limiter. It's because of the stock the secondary spring, not the stock secondary spring. The secondary spring that they sent out. Now I'm not saying put the stock one in, but you have to add weight or play with the springs for a little bit to get this dialed in. Sorry, that were my neighbors. So I got this clutch set up for 25s. It came with this spring. I think it's a 1016. Yep, it's a 1016 or an 1816. No, whatever. Pretty stiff secondary spring. So this took my engagement from the stock like 1800 to about 23, 2400. I would see occasionally. And the engagement still was pretty smooth. I actually thought it was smoother than stock. But I'd be going down the road on gravel and I'd pin it and bop, bop, hits the rev limiter, comes back down. And when it came back down, it's still cranking like 76 to 7,800 RPMs. Well, peak power on these, I would say is 72 to 74. Maybe a little higher if you have an exhaust or cams done to it, right? And then you got to tune for that. So I'm like, why are we shifting so fast and why are we shooting for such a high RPM? And that didn't make sense to me. So that's when I went to the other spring that came in this clutch. It was a 1015 and went back out And this time I'm having a 16 to 1700 RPM engagement. Now you're gonna think that it thing's gonna be a turd off the line, and I can tell you it is not. It pulls way harder than stock. So, I guess I shouldn't say that. I had a lower RPM engagement, but I still had high RPMs at full throttle. So, I went and got some pennies. I threw a penny in each one of these sliders, and holy shit, did that thing go. That belt and clutch combo, also stock belt, was gripping so hard. It was amazing. And I would pin it on the gravel and it would hit about 7,000, 7,100. And I'm just a hair under. I'm gonna drill out the center of these pennies, and I did that on all 6 of them. Went out, pin it, she'd shoot up to 73, and she sits there at 73, 7,400 RPM. Until we hit full shift on these clutches. Meaning the belt is at the outer rim of this clutch, and the cogs of the belt are touching the bottom of the secondary, and then it starts climbing RPM. So you have, that's gonna be inevitable. You have a pretty much infinite amount of resistance. It's just gonna increase RPM from there because the motor still wants to wind up, but it can't because it's at max shift. So it can only do it by RPM. Right? We're out of clutches. Pretty much what I'm trying to say is we're out of clutches. And this is what I was blown away by. With this spring in and the weights that they have recommended, 20 grams for my 25-inch tires, at 7,200 RPMs, at 72 miles an hour, I was at 8,800 RPMs. I'm like, well, what the fuck? I'm like, this seems worse than stock. Why would anyone want to do this? So, when I went to this spring with probably 21 and a half grams of weight, I can do 89 miles an hour at 7,900 RPM. Talk about a huge difference. I can go over 10 miles an hour faster with almost 1,000 less RPM. That is way less wear on the motor, that is way less wear on the drive components, that's way less wear on the belt and the clutches and all that behind it. And because of that, I actually think I have one of the fastest top speed, the fastest Can-Am Renegades out there. And mind you, my motor is stock. I have a slip-on HMF Quiet Series, a twin foam air filter, which is a minimal upgrade, and a RVS tune. That's all I have done to my four-wheeler, and I'm hitting 89 miles an hour on a stock engine. So that is my gripe with the tuning on these clutches. Another gripe with this is my biggest complaint with the CV-Tech, is that this CV-Tech has a friction locked or friction style one-way bearing, meaning that it's a smooth shaft. The inside of the bearing has like little fingers, and as when it goes one way, is those go up and they all push up against the shaft of the clutch and they bite. Well, now I need a special tool to replace the fried one-way bearing in my clutch. Okay, where the Can-Am clutch is a mechanical lock. It has 2 springs, the 2 pins hit out, and they ride in 2 grooves. Boom. As long as there's grease in there, that in theory should never wear out. And honestly, I like this system because this is a lot easier, it's a lot simpler. I don't need any specialty tools for this at all over this. The one-way bearing for this with the tool is 150 bucks. Ouch. I've had a 400 Outlander, granted it's a 400, with the same one-way bearing last 10 to 11,000 miles. Never touched it. I just greased it and cleaned it once a year. So that's my gripe with the tuning on these clutches. It's not that any of these clutches are bad or I'm bashing any other clutch out there, is that people are misinformed on the stock clutch. And for most people, the stock clutch will do just fine. I also see that people say, well, the stock clutch slips. Look at the polished face. Well, that's not a dictation of belt slip. If your belt was slipping, it would be wearing off the edge of the belt, putting black marks on the side. That's belt slip. That's why down by the engagement here, you see a dark ring. That's part of the belt. That's the belt slip. The reason why this is polished is the belt rides up and down this constantly with hundreds of pounds of force side loading it. If you have black marks, that's belt slip. Because all my snowmobile clutches look exactly like this and no belt slip. Doesn't matter if they're stock, if they have a SPI kit, if they have a Dynamo Joe kit, they all have a polished surface face because of the belt riding up and down. So, if you want information on clutching, I highly recommend watching Dynaport's videos on YouTube. He has some good information on clutching, and iBackshift. They both do snowmobile stuff, but the same principles apply to the CVTs on the four-wheeler. Resistance equals RPM. The fly weights kind of settle down RPM. And secondary, same thing. Resistance equals RPM. So I think I got everything.